Welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the most infamous stories from the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah. These two ancient cities are shrouded in mystery and controversy, renowned for their dramatic destruction as a divine judgment. But what really happened in these cities? Were they truly as wicked as described? Join us as we explore the historical, archaeological, and theological aspects of Sodom and Gomorrah. Get ready for an eye-opening journey into the past that will challenge your understanding of these legendary cities. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. Location and significance. In the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah are described as cities located on the plain of Jordan. They are mentioned in Genesis 13 verse 10 as well-watered, and compared to the garden of the Lord and the land of Egypt. This suggests a fertile and prosperous region. The narrative continues in Genesis 19, where the cities are destroyed by fire and brimstone as a punishment for their inhabitants' wickedness. Moral and theological implications. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah serves as a powerful moral and theological lesson in the Bible. It illustrates the consequences of sin and the extent of divine judgment. The cities became synonymous with vice and immorality, and their fate is often referenced in later biblical texts and religious teachings as a warning against sinful behavior. Archaeological and historical investigations. Early theories. Historically, scholars and explorers have proposed various locations for Sodom and Gomorrah. One of the earliest theories suggested that the cities were located at the southern end of the Dead Sea. This idea was based on the geographical descriptions in the Bible and the presence of natural sulfur and bitumen deposits in the area. Bab-ed-Hdhra and Numaira. In the mid-20th century, archaeologists identified two ancient sites, Bab-ed-Hdhra and Numaira, as potential locations for Sodom and Gomorrah. These sites are located near the southeastern shore of the Dead Sea and contain evidence of extensive destruction by fire. Excavations revealed large cemeteries, storage facilities, and residential structures, providing a glimpse into the life and culture of the region. Bab-ed-Hdhra. Bab-ed-Hdhra is one of the most extensively studied sites. Archaeological evidence suggests that it was occupied from the early Bronze Age, 3150 to 2200 BCE, to the Middle Bronze Age, 2200 to 1550 BCE. The site includes a large cemetery with thousands of tombs, indicating a significant population. The remains of a massive fortified structure and burnt layers suggest a sudden and catastrophic end, possibly aligning with the biblical account of divine destruction. Numaira. Numaira, located nearby, also shows signs of a violent end. The site contains ruins of residential buildings, pottery, and other artifacts. Similar to Bab-ed-Hdhra, Numaira's destruction layer includes evidence of intense fire. The close proximity and similar archaeological findings of these two sites support the theory that they could be the biblical Sodom and Gomorrah. Northern theories. While the southern Dead Sea region remains the most widely accepted location for Sodom and Gomorrah, some scholars have proposed alternative theories placing the cities at the northern end of the Dead Sea. This hypothesis is based on different interpretations of biblical texts and geographical clues. Geological evidence. Dead Sea Rift. The Dead Sea Rift, a major geological fault line, runs through the region where Sodom and Gomorrah are believed to have been located. This fault line has been responsible for significant seismic activity, including earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Such geological activity could have contributed to the fiery destruction described in the Bible. Sulfur and bitumen deposits. The presence of natural sulfur and bitumen deposits in the area provides additional support for the biblical account. These materials are highly flammable and could have ignited during an earthquake or other seismic event, leading to a catastrophic firestorm. This natural phenomenon aligns with the description of fire and brimstone raining down on the cities. Historical context. Canaanite culture. During the time Sodom and Gomorrah are believed to have existed, the region was inhabited by Canaanite civilizations. The Canaanites were known for their advanced urban centers, trade networks, and diverse religious practices. The biblical portrayal of Sodom and Gomorrah as cities of vice and immorality may reflect the cultural and religious tensions between the Israelites and the Canaanites. Trade and prosperity. The Jordan Valley, including the area around the Dead Sea, was a strategic trade route connecting different parts of the ancient Near East. The fertile plains and abundant natural resources contributed to the prosperity of cities like Sodom and Gomorrah. Their wealth and prominence may have made them centers of attraction and, consequently, targets of divine judgment in biblical narratives. Significance in religious and cultural traditions. Judeo-Christian tradition. In Judeo-Christian tradition, Sodom and Gomorrah serve as archetypes of sin and divine punishment. The story is frequently referenced in religious teachings, sermons, and moral exhortations. The fate of these cities underscores themes of justice, repentance, and the consequences of moral decay. Islamic tradition. In Islam, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is also significant. The cities are known as Lut's people after the prophet Lut, Lot in the Bible. The Quran recounts their destruction as a punishment for their wickedness and disobedience to God's commands. The narrative emphasizes themes of moral integrity, divine justice, and the consequences of transgression. Modern interpretations and debates. Scientific explanations. Modern scholars and scientists have attempted to explain the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah through natural phenomena. Some theories propose that a meteor or comet impact could have caused the fiery destruction described in the Bible. Others suggest that the cities were victims of a massive earthquake combined with the ignition of natural gas and sulfur deposits. Ethical and moral lessons. Contemporary interpretations of the Sodom and Gomorrah narrative often focus on the ethical and moral lessons it imparts. The story is used to discuss issues such as hospitality, social justice, and the treatment of strangers and marginalized individuals. The ancient city's fate serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of societal corruption and the importance of righteous behavior. Narrative. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were located in the plain of Jordan, a fertile and prosperous region. They were part of a group of 5 cities referred to as the cities of the plain. The inhabitants of these cities were known for their extreme depravity and moral corruption, engaging in acts that were considered abhorrent by biblical standards. Divine visitors. The narrative begins in Genesis 18, where Abraham, the patriarch, receives 3 visitors near the great trees of Mamre. These visitors are later revealed to be divine beings, with one of them being the Lord himself. Abraham, exhibiting the ancient Near Eastern custom of hospitality, invites them in and offers them food and rest. During their visit, one of the divine beings reveals to Abraham that Sarah, his wife, will bear a son despite her old age. Following this announcement, the visitors turn their attention to Sodom and Gomorrah. The Lord reveals to Abraham his intention to investigate the cities because of the grave outcry against them. Abraham, concerned for the righteous people who might live there, engages in a dialogue with the Lord, pleading for mercy if even a small number of righteous individuals can be found. The Lord agrees that if 10 righteous people are found, he will spare the cities. Lot's hospitality. In Genesis 19, 2 angels arrive in Sodom in the evening. Lot, Abraham's nephew, is sitting at the city gate and insists on offering them hospitality, knowing the dangerous environment they would face if left in the open. Reluctantly, the angels accept his offer. Lot prepares a feast for them, but before they retire for the night, the men of Sodom surround his house, demanding to have the visitors brought out so they can abuse them. Lot attempts to protect his guests by offering his daughters instead, but the mob refuses and tries to break down the door. The angels intervene, striking the men with blindness, and warn Lot that he and his family must leave the city immediately because it is about to be destroyed. Destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot hesitates, so the angels physically lead him, his wife, and his 2 daughters out of the city, instructing them to flee to the mountains and not look back. As they flee, the Lord rains down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah, obliterating the cities and their inhabitants. Lot's wife disobeys the command, looks back, and is turned into a pillar of salt. Themes and interpretations. Sin and depravity. The story underscores the extent of Sodom and Gomorrah's sinfulness. The specific nature of their sins has been a subject of debate, often interpreted as sexual immorality, inhospitality, or a broader sense of social injustice. Their actions represent a complete rejection of divine and moral order. Divine judgment. The narrative illustrates the concept of divine retribution, where extreme sinfulness leads to inevitable judgment and destruction. This serves as a warning to readers about the consequences of turning away from righteousness. Mercy and intercession. Abraham's intercession for Sodom demonstrates the power of prayer and the potential for mercy. It highlights the idea that God is willing to spare the wicked for the sake of the righteous, showcasing his justice tempered with mercy. Hospitality. The stark contrast between Abraham's and Lot's hospitality and the Sodomites' lack of it underscores the importance of this virtue in ancient Near Eastern culture and, by extension, in the biblical worldview. Obedience and disobedience. Lot's wife's fate serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of disobedience. Her transformation into a pillar of salt is a dramatic representation of the dangers of looking back or longing for a sinful past. Historical and archaeological context. The historical and archaeological authenticity of Sodom and Gomorrah has been a topic of much debate. Some scholars suggest that the cities might have been located near the Dead Sea, an area known for its geological activity and sulfur deposits. Excavations in the region have uncovered evidence of ancient settlements that were suddenly abandoned or destroyed, potentially correlating with the biblical account. However, definitive proof remains elusive, and the story is often understood within its theological and literary framework rather than as a strict historical record. Literary analysis. The narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah is rich with literary elements. It employs dramatic tension, vivid imagery, and moral dichotomies to convey its messages. The dialogues between Abraham and the Lord, and between Lot and the Sodomites, are particularly significant, revealing character motivations and moral themes. Dramatic tension. The story builds tension through the impending doom of the cities and the urgent warnings of the angels. The moment when Lot's house is surrounded by the mob is a climax of suspense and danger. Imagery and symbolism. The transformation of Lot's wife into a pillar of salt is a powerful image that has resonated through art and literature. The raining down of sulfur and fire is a dramatic depiction of divine wrath. Moral dichotomies. The narrative contrasts righteousness and wickedness, hospitality and inhospitality, obedience and disobedience. These dichotomies serve to highlight the moral lessons inherent in the story. Theological implications. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah carries profound theological implications. It reflects the biblical understanding of God's nature as both just and merciful. The narrative affirms that while God is patient and willing to forgive, there is a limit to his tolerance for sin. The destruction of the cities serves as a sobering reminder of the seriousness of sin and the reality of divine judgment. Justice and mercy. The interplay between God's justice and mercy is a central theme. Abraham's negotiation with God reveals a divine willingness to show mercy, but also the inevitability of justice when sin reaches its full measure. Covenant relationship. The narrative reinforces the covenant relationship between God and Abraham. Abraham's role as an intercessor underscores his unique position and the broader theme of intercession in biblical theology. Moral accountability. The story emphasizes the concept of moral accountability. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah serves as a divine indictment against extreme wickedness and a call to righteousness. Contemporary relevance. The narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah continues to hold relevance in contemporary discussions on morality, justice, and divine judgment. It is often cited in debates about social and ethical issues, serving as a powerful illustration of the consequences of moral decay. Moral lessons. The story serves as a timeless reminder of the importance of upholding moral values and the dangers of allowing societal corruption to go unchecked. Social justice. Interpretations that emphasize the sins of inhospitality and social injustice resonate with contemporary concerns about human rights and the treatment of the vulnerable. Religious discourse. The narrative remains a key reference point in religious discourse, informing theological discussions on sin, judgment, and intercession. Destruction. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is primarily located in Genesis chapters 18 and 19. According to the Bible, these cities were part of the cities of the plain, a group of 5 cities including Admah, Zeboim, and Zor. The narrative begins with Abraham receiving visitors, who are later revealed to be divine messengers. These messengers inform Abraham that Sodom and Gomorrah are to be destroyed due to their great sinfulness. Abraham pleads with God to spare the cities if righteous people can be found within them, negotiating down to 10 righteous individuals. However, even this small number cannot be found. 2 angels visit Sodom and are hosted by Lot, Abraham's nephew. The men of Sodom surround Lot's house, demanding to have relations with the visitors. Lot offers his daughters instead, but the crowd rejects the offer. The angels then strike the crowd with blindness and warn Lot to flee with his family, as the city will be destroyed. Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters escape, but his wife looks back and is turned into a pillar of salt. The cities are then destroyed by fire and brimstone from heaven. Historical and archaeological context. The exact historical and geographical locations of Sodom and Gomorrah have been subjects of speculation and debate among scholars and archaeologists. Many believe the cities were located near the Dead Sea, an area known for its geological activity, including tar pits and natural asphalt deposits that could explain that fire and brimstone described in the Bible. Archaeological evidence has been sparse and inconclusive. Some sites, such as Bab-e-Dhdhra and Numaira, have been proposed as possible locations. These sites show evidence of sudden destruction and abandonment around 2000 BCE, which could align with the biblical timeline. However, definitive proof linking these sites to the biblical Sodom and Gomorrah remains elusive. Theological significance. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah carries profound theological implications. It serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of sin and the importance of righteousness. The nature of the sin of Sodom has been interpreted in various ways throughout history. Sin and judgment. The traditional interpretation focuses on sexual immorality, particularly homosexual acts, as the primary sin of Sodom. This view has been influential in shaping Judeo-Christian teachings on sexual ethics. However, other interpretations highlight different aspects of the story. The prophets Ezekiel and Isaiah, for example, emphasize the city's arrogance, inhospitality, and social injustice. Ezekiel 16 verses 49 to 50 states, "Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom, she and her daughters were arrogant, overfed and unconcerned, they did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore I did away with them as you have seen." This broader understanding of Sodom's sin aligns with themes of social justice and compassion found throughout the Bible. Divine justice and mercy. The story also illustrates the tension between divine justice and mercy. Abraham's negotiation with God reflects a deep concern for justice and the value of righteous individuals. God's willingness to spare the city for the sake of a few righteous people highlights his mercy. However, the ultimate destruction of the cities underscores the seriousness of sin and the inevitability of divine judgment. The role of Lot. Lot's role in the story is complex. He is depicted as a righteous man living in a sinful city, offering hospitality to the divine messengers and protecting them from harm. However, his willingness to offer his daughters to the mob raises ethical questions. Lot's escape and his wife's transformation into a pillar of salt further emphasize the themes of obedience and the consequences of looking back or clinging to a sinful past. New Testament references. The New Testament also references Sodom and Gomorrah, using their destruction as a warning of future judgment. Jesus compares the fate of unrepentant cities to that of Sodom and Gomorrah, emphasizing the severity of rejecting divine messages, Matthew 10 verse 15, Luke 10 verse 12. The epistles, particularly 2 Peter 2 verse 6 and Jude 1 verse 7, also use the story as an example of God's judgment on immorality and wickedness. Moral and ethical lessons. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah continues to be relevant in discussions of morality and ethics. It challenges readers to consider the nature of sin, the importance of hospitality and justice, and the balance between judgment and mercy. Different faith traditions and denominations may interpret the story in various ways, but its core message about the consequences of collective sin and the need for righteousness remains influential. Modern interpretations. In contemporary discourse, the story has been examined through various lenses, including historical critical analysis, feminist theology, and queer theology. These perspectives offer new insights and critiques of traditional interpretations. For example, feminist theologians may focus on the treatment of Lot's daughters and the gender dynamics in the narrative. Queer theologians may challenge the interpretation that focuses solely on sexual immorality, advocating for a more inclusive understanding of the text. Sin and judgment. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is recounted in Genesis 18 to 19. According to the narrative, these cities were known for their grievous sins, which led to their ultimate destruction. The Lord, having heard the outcry against the cities, decided to investigate and, if necessary, punish them. Abraham, a key figure in this narrative, intercedes on behalf of the cities, asking if God would spare them for the sake of the righteous. God agrees that if 10 righteous people can be found, the cities will be spared. However, the cities are found wanting, and their destruction becomes inevitable. The angels sent to investigate are met with hostility by the inhabitants of Sodom, who seek to assault them. This wickedness confirms the city's moral decay, and as a result, God rains down sulfur and fire, obliterating Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot, Abraham's nephew, and his family are the only survivors, having been warned to flee. The nature of sin. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is often cited as a condemnation of specific sins, notably sexual immorality. However, a closer examination reveals that the narrative is multifaceted, addressing broader themes of sin and moral failure. The cry against the cities in Genesis 18 verses 20 to 21 suggests that their sins were diverse and extensive, encompassing not only sexual misconduct, but also a general disregard for justice and righteousness. 1. Sexual immorality. The narrative highlights the sexual sins of the cities, with the attempted assault on the visiting angels being a pivotal event. This aspect of the story has been historically interpreted as a condemnation of homosexual behavior, though modern scholarship often contextualizes these actions within broader themes of inhospitality and violence. 2. Injustice and oppression. The prophets Ezekiel and Isaiah provide additional insight into the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah. Ezekiel 16 verses 49 to 50 reveals that the cities were also guilty of arrogance, neglect of the poor and needy, and abominable practices. This broader view underscores that the sins leading to their downfall were not limited to sexual immorality but included social injustices and a general moral decay. Divine judgment. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is a dramatic representation of divine judgment. Theologically, it serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of persistent sin and moral failure. The narrative illustrates several key aspects of divine judgment. 1. Justice and righteousness. God's judgment is portrayed as a response to the accumulation of iniquity and the rejection of righteousness. The negotiation between Abraham and God highlights the principle that divine judgment is meted out with regard to justice and mercy. The city's inability to produce even 10 righteous individuals underscores the depth of their moral corruption. 2. The role of intercession. Abraham's intercession demonstrates the potential for mercy and the impact of righteous advocacy. The narrative suggests that intercession can influence divine judgment, though it ultimately cannot alter the consequences if moral decay is too entrenched. 3. The nature of divine wrath. The destruction of the cities by fire and sulfur symbolizes the intensity and finality of divine wrath. This act of judgment is both a punitive measure and a warning, illustrating that God's patience has limits and that there are severe consequences for persistent sin. Theological and moral lessons. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah offers several theological and moral lessons that extend beyond its immediate context. 1. The nature of sin. The narrative underscores that sin is not a single, isolated act, but a pervasive condition that affects various aspects of life. The city's downfall was not due to one type of sin, but a cumulative effect of multiple forms of moral and social failure. 2. The importance of justice. Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction highlights the critical importance of justice and compassion. The neglect of the poor and the practice of oppression are presented as serious transgressions that contribute to the city's moral collapse. 3. The limits of divine patience. The story illustrates that while God is patient and merciful, there is a limit to how long divine patience can endure in the face of persistent sin. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of exceeding these limits. 4. The possibility of redemption. The narrative implicitly suggests that redemption is possible if individuals and communities genuinely repent and change their ways. The presence of Abraham and Lot, who embody righteousness and hospitality, contrasts sharply with the surrounding moral decay and highlights the possibility of a different outcome. Contemporary reflections. In contemporary contexts, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah continues to provoke discussion and reflection on sin and judgment. While interpretations of the narrative can vary widely, it remains a potent symbol of the consequences of moral failure and divine justice. The themes of the narrative, such as the importance of justice, the nature of sin, and the limits of divine patience, resonate with modern concerns about social justice, ethical behavior, and the nature of divine human relationships. 1. Social justice. The narrative's emphasis on justice and the treatment of the poor is particularly relevant today. The lessons from Sodom and Gomorrah encourage a focus on social justice and ethical behavior, challenging individuals and societies to address issues of inequality and exploitation. 2. Moral integrity. The story underscores the importance of maintaining moral integrity and resisting the temptations of corruption and sin. In an era where ethical standards can be compromised, the narrative serves as a reminder of the need for personal and collective righteousness. 3. Theological implications. The theological implications of the story invite reflection on the nature of divine judgment and the relationship between justice and mercy. It encourages a nuanced understanding of how divine justice operates and the ways in which humans can seek redemption and alignment with divine will. Archaeological evidence. Sodom and Gomorrah are described in Genesis 18-19 as two cities that were extremely sinful. According to the text, their inhabitants engaged in grave immorality, prompting God to decide their destruction. The narrative describes how Abraham pleaded for the cities to be spared if righteous people could be found within them. When none were found, the cities were destroyed by fire and brimstone. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah has been a subject of religious and historical scrutiny, with debates focusing on the literal versus allegorical interpretation of the biblical account. Archaeological findings have the potential to substantiate or challenge the historical accuracy of the biblical narrative. Archaeological investigations. The search for Sodom and Gomorrah has primarily focused on regions in the southern part of the Dead Sea, an area known for its ancient cities and settlements. The main archaeological sites proposed as candidates for these biblical cities are Tal el-Hammam, located in Jordan's northern part of the Dead Sea region. Tal el-Hammam has gained significant attention. Excavations at this site suggest a major city existed here around the time traditionally associated with Sodom and Gomorrah. The site shows evidence of a massive, sudden destruction around 1650 BCE, characterized by intense heat and a significant conflagration. This destruction aligns with the biblical description of fiery annihilation. Bab-ed-Hdhra. This site is located on the eastern side of the Dead Sea and features an ancient city with evidence of abrupt destruction. Archaeological layers indicate a catastrophic event around 2300 BCE. Bab-ed-Hdhra's destruction could correspond to the biblical narrative's timeline, though the exact nature of the destruction remains debated. Numaira, near Bab-ed-Hdhra. Numaira is another candidate. Excavations reveal evidence of a sudden destruction event around the same period as Bab-ed-Hdhra. The site shows signs of fire and possible earthquake damage. While the evidence aligns with a catastrophic event, whether it corresponds to Sodom and Gomorrah remains speculative. Gezer, although not a primary candidate, some researchers have examined Gezer, which has revealed evidence of destruction layers. However, the connection to Sodom and Gomorrah is less direct and more circumstantial. Key findings and interpretations. 1. Evidence of catastrophic destruction. Archaeological evidence from Tal el-Hammam, Bab-ed-Hdhra, and Numaira consistently shows signs of violent and sudden destruction. This includes heat damage. At Tal el-Hammam, researchers found evidence of intense heat, such as melted pottery and vitrified brick, suggesting exposure to temperatures high enough to cause such damage. This finding is consistent with the biblical account of cities being destroyed by fire and brimstone. Destruction layers. All three sites have distinct destruction layers. These layers contain debris, charred remains, and signs of conflagration, indicative of a sudden, catastrophic event. 2. Radiocarbon dating. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal and other organic materials at these sites provides a timeline for the destruction events. For example, Tal el-Hammam's destruction has been dated to around 1650 BCE, a period that roughly corresponds to the traditional date of the biblical Sodom and Gomorrah story. 3. Cultural and historical context. The destruction layers at these sites align with known historical patterns of urban decline and disaster in the region. This includes evidence of increased seismic activity, which could explain the sudden and violent destruction described in the biblical narrative. 4. Absence of certain evidence. Despite these findings, no definitive evidence directly correlates to the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. The absence of specific artifacts, inscriptions, or other clear identifiers makes it difficult to conclusively identify any of these sites as the exact biblical locations. Debates and challenges. Several challenges and debates surround the archaeological evidence for Sodom and Gomorrah. 1. Identification issues. Identifying ancient cities with biblical names is inherently problematic. The destruction layers at proposed sites might not necessarily correspond to Sodom and Gomorrah, but could represent other contemporaneous cities or events. 2. Interpretation of evidence. Interpreting archaeological evidence is complex. The intensity of the destruction found at these sites could be attributed to natural disasters, such as earthquakes or meteor impacts, rather than divine intervention. 3. Historical context. The historical context of the biblical narrative complicates the interpretation. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah might have been shaped by a combination of historical events and theological interpretations, making it challenging to isolate and identify specific events that correspond to the biblical account. Theological debates. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, found in Genesis 18-19, is a narrative about two cities notorious for their wickedness. God decides to destroy these cities due to their grave sins, but Abraham pleads for their salvation if a certain number of righteous people can be found. The cities are ultimately destroyed, with only Lot and his family escaping. This story has been interpreted in various ways, often highlighting themes of divine justice, moral decay, and the nature of righteousness. Theological debates, similarly, are fraught with intense disagreements, often centered around questions of morality, justice, and the nature of divinity. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah were judged for their moral failings, theological debates often address issues of ethical behavior, doctrinal purity, and the perceived decay of moral standards within religious communities. The nature of theological debates. 1. Intensity and conflict. Theological debates are characterized by their fervent intensity. They often involve deeply held beliefs and can lead to sharp conflicts, much like the confrontation between God and Sodom and Gomorrah. These debates can be seen as a form of moral and intellectual wrestling, where participants grapple with fundamental questions about faith, ethics, and divine will. Theologians and scholars, like Abraham negotiating with God, frequently engage in discussions to discern the righteous positions on various issues. These debates can be polarizing, with different factions advocating for differing interpretations of religious texts and doctrines. The stakes in these debates can be perceived as high, reflecting concerns about the health and integrity of religious communities, similar to how the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was seen as a response to the moral failure of these cities. 2. Moral urgency. Much like the urgency in Abraham's intercession for Sodom and Gomorrah, theological debates often carry a sense of moral urgency. Participants might feel that the issues at stake are crucial for the moral and spiritual health of their communities or for the preservation of their religious traditions. This urgency can be seen in debates over issues such as social justice, ethical conduct, and doctrinal purity. The sense of urgency in theological debates reflects a belief that the moral and spiritual direction of a community or tradition is at risk. Just as the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was a dramatic statement about the consequences of moral failure, contemporary theological debates often focus on issues that are perceived as critical to maintaining or restoring moral and spiritual integrity. 3. Quest for righteousness. The search for righteousness is a central theme in the Sodom and Gomorrah narrative. Abraham's bargaining with God reflects a desire to find a remnant of righteousness that could save the cities from destruction. In a similar vein, theological debates often involve a quest for what is right and just within the framework of religious belief. Participants in these debates may be motivated by a desire to uphold what they see as true and just, reflecting their understanding of divine will and ethical standards. The debates can be seen as a way of striving for a higher moral and spiritual standard, much like the search for righteousness in the Sodom and Gomorrah story. The dynamics of theological debate. 1. The role of righteous individuals. In the Sodom and Gomorrah narrative, the presence of a few righteous individuals was seen as potentially salvaging the cities. Similarly, in theological debates, individuals who hold to a perceived higher standard of righteousness often play crucial roles. These individuals may advocate for ethical reforms, doctrinal changes, or new interpretations of religious teachings that they believe are necessary for the well-being of their communities. The contributions of these individuals can be pivotal in shaping the direction of theological debates. Their insights and arguments may challenge prevailing views and push for a reassessment of what constitutes righteousness and ethical behavior within their religious contexts. 2. The challenge of moral decay. The perceived moral decay in Sodom and Gomorrah parallels the concerns about moral and ethical decline that often arise in theological debates. Participants in these debates might argue that contemporary issues reflect a broader moral decline within society or within religious communities. This sense of decline can fuel passionate arguments and a desire to address perceived problems before they lead to further deterioration. Debates about issues such as social justice, ethical behavior, and doctrinal adherence often reflect concerns about how contemporary practices align with traditional moral and spiritual standards. The challenge of addressing these issues can be likened to the challenge faced by Abraham and Lot in the narrative, a quest to address and counteract perceived moral decay. 3. The impact of divine judgment. The divine judgment that befell Sodom and Gomorrah serves as a dramatic illustration of the consequences of moral failure. In theological debates, the notion of divine judgment can manifest in discussions about the implications of particular beliefs or practices. Participants might argue that certain positions or actions could lead to negative consequences for individuals or communities, reflecting their understanding of divine will and moral order. These discussions often involve examining the potential outcomes of different theological stances, considering how they align with or deviate from perceived divine principles. The notion of judgment can thus serve as a motivator for rigorous debate and a call to adhere to what is perceived as righteous and just. The broader implications. 1. The role of tradition and change. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah highlights the tension between tradition and change. The city's destruction can be seen as a dramatic statement about the limits of tolerance for moral failings, while Abraham's plea reflects a hope for change and redemption. Similarly, theological debates often involve discussions about the balance between preserving tradition and embracing change. Participants in these debates might grapple with questions about how to uphold traditional teachings while addressing contemporary issues. This tension can lead to various interpretations and responses, reflecting the complex interplay between maintaining religious heritage and responding to new challenges. 2. The search for common ground. Despite the intensity of theological debates, there is often a desire to find common ground and reach understanding. Just as Abraham sought to negotiate with God for the sake of Sodom and Gomorrah, participants in theological debates may seek to find shared values and principles that can bridge differences. Efforts to find common ground can lead to constructive dialogue and a deeper understanding of differing perspectives. This search for commonality reflects a commitment to addressing issues in a manner that acknowledges and respects diverse viewpoints, even amid significant disagreements. 3. The role of community. Theological debates often take place within the context of religious communities, and the outcomes of these debates can have significant implications for these communities. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah underscores the impact of collective moral behavior on communal fate, and theological debates similarly reflect concerns about the well-being and integrity of religious communities. The debates can influence community practices, teachings, and the overall direction of religious life. The outcomes of these discussions can shape the moral and spiritual landscape of communities, impacting their identity and mission. Cultural and legal references. In the biblical narrative, Sodom and Gomorrah are described as cities that were exceedingly wicked and sinful. According to Genesis 18 and 19, God decided to destroy them due to their grievous sins, which included violations of hospitality, moral corruption, and general immorality. Abraham, the patriarch of the Israelites, pleaded with God to spare the cities if 10 righteous people could be found, but ultimately, only Lot, Abraham's nephew, was saved. The cities were destroyed by fire and brimstone, a dramatic act of divine retribution. Cultural references. 1. Literature and art. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah has inspired countless works of literature and art. During the Renaissance, artists like Michelangelo and Peter Paul Rubens depicted the city's destruction, emphasizing themes of divine justice and moral decay. These depictions often highlight the dramatic and catastrophic nature of the city's end, reinforcing the idea of divine punishment for moral transgressions. In literature, the cities have often symbolized extreme moral depravity. John Milton's Paradise Lost and other works use Sodom and Gomorrah as archetypes of wickedness and divine retribution. The story serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of moral and ethical failures, reflecting broader themes of sin and redemption. 2. Modern media. In contemporary culture, Sodom and Gomorrah are frequently referenced to critique moral and societal issues. Films, television shows, and literature use the cities as metaphors for contemporary problems, such as corruption, decadence, and societal collapse. These references often draw parallels between ancient and modern issues, suggesting a cyclical nature of moral decline and redemption. For instance, the concept of Sodom and Gomorrah is invoked in discussions about urban decay, moral crises, and ethical failures in modern cities. The cities' names have become shorthand for discussions about societal values and ethical standards. Legal references. 1. Legal precedents and moral law. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah has influenced legal thought and moral law, particularly in the context of discussions about justice and punishment. In medieval and early modern Europe, the narrative was sometimes used to justify harsh legal penalties for perceived moral transgressions. The city's destruction served as a precedent for discussions about the necessity of legal and moral vigilance to prevent societal collapse. 2. Influence on laws and legal concepts. The Sodom and Gomorrah story has also been referenced in the context of laws related to morality and public behavior. For instance, in some historical contexts, legal systems have drawn on biblical stories to shape laws regarding sexual conduct and public morality. The city's depiction as embodiments of sexual immorality has influenced laws related to sexuality and public decency. 3. Legal metaphors and analogies. In legal discourse, Sodom and Gomorrah are sometimes used as metaphors to discuss cases involving moral and ethical questions. For example, arguments about the extent of government intervention in moral issues or the nature of legal punishment for moral failings can draw on the imagery of these cities. Legal scholars and practitioners might use the city story to illustrate arguments about justice, morality, and the role of law in regulating behavior. Historical and scholarly analyses. 1. Archaeological and historical perspectives. The historical existence of Sodom and Gomorrah has been a subject of scholarly debate. Archaeological searches have sought to identify the physical locations of these cities and understand their historical context. While definitive evidence for the city's existence has not been found, scholars have explored theories about their possible locations and the historical events that might have inspired the biblical narrative. 2. Interpretation of moral lessons. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah has been interpreted in various ways by theologians and scholars. Some view it as a literal account of divine punishment, while others see it as a symbolic narrative representing broader moral and theological lessons. Interpretations often focus on themes of justice, righteousness, and the consequences of sin, reflecting ongoing debates about the role of divine justice in human affairs. 3. Contemporary reinterpretations. In contemporary scholarship, the narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah is often reinterpreted to address issues of social justice, human rights, and ethical behavior. Some modern interpretations emphasize the importance of understanding the historical and cultural context of the story, questioning traditional readings that might have been used to justify discriminatory or punitive practices. Thanks for joining us as we explored the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into historical and biblical events. Share your thoughts or questions in the comments below. We love hearing from you. For additional resources and exclusive content, check out our Patreon link in the description. Stay tuned for our next episode where we unravel more mysteries from history and theology. Until then, keep seeking truth and understanding. See you next time.